Okay, we're going to do a review now. As promised, look. See, yeah, that's my class. Oh man, it's too late. We went on a hike earlier today. So now it's sleepy time. Anyway, this is Gooby? That's not his official name. Everybody keeps telling me it's a stupid name, but it's what I've been calling him just for now. Okay, so this is your review, exam 2 review. You have any comments? Okay. Usually he's way more talkative than this. So with assessments, we're talking about speech assessments. Oh no. Don't try to attack the camera. Standardized is the key. So we talked about this a little bit in fluency disorders. We did also talk about it a little bit in the last exam, but I'm going to ask you a question about it on this exam. Just hang out. It's okay. Stay here. You want standardized norms for your assessments. The norms and criteria are there to gauge performance. You can assess one child and know where they lie, like what percentile they're in, the 99th percentile, the 85th percentile, the 20th percentile. Oh, you just want to go sleep? So that's why norms and criteria are key, and that only comes with standardized exams. So I know we always think like, oh, standardized tests, gross, right? Like when you have to do the SAT and stuff like that, but there is something to be said for them. There might be some problems with the SAT, but with our standardized tests for fluency and the BESA test for English language proficiency, things like that, it's really useful to be able to say where your client actually lies on all these different assessments. It's not subjective. It's not up to you to say like, wow, this is so sleepy. It's not up to you to say like, well, I think this is a lot of stuttering, right? Like we're talking about like what is severe and what is mild, and it's kind of subjective. When you actually have norms, you take the subjectivity out of it. Okay, neurogenic speech disorders. What is TBI? What does it stand for? Traumatic brain injury. You can have a penetrating injury or not. Penetrating injury is one that goes through the skull. So like maybe a bullet wound or a piece of shrapnel or something like that. Or you can just have a closed head injury, which would be, any sort of just large, full-scale trauma. Do you just want to lay down? Is that what you want? Okay. Oh, yeah. All right. Any sort of like blunt force trauma to the head, something like that, that would be a non-penetrating injury. But essentially, it's sudden and acute damage to the brain. There are a few common short-term effects of TBI, and those are loss of consciousness. Remember, Phineas Gage, one of our most well-known cases of TBI, penetrating TBI, right through the head, lost consciousness, and that's common. There's not a lot of common side effects. This is true of all of our brain disorders. There's all sorts of crazy things that happen, common or uncommon. I mean, there's not a lot of commonalities, but some of them are loss of consciousness right after the damage, and also you can have things that look like aphasia, but they often dissipate. So when somebody shows up with a TBI and it looks like they have aphasia, it's not always diagnosed right away. A lot of times that'll wait until a few days when it should be cleared up if it's not permanent. What about common long-term effects? Well, it differs greatly for everybody. What? What do you want? Don't get into trouble. He's gonna start biting my feet soon. This is just what happens. Anyway, so the common long-term effects, these are different, largely different for everybody. You can have aphasia, you cannot have aphasia, you can have motor problems, and even within the aphasias, we've seen that there's a whole bunch of different types of aphasia. There's biting feet. Who's at risk? Well, usually more men are at risk. This is not for aphasia caused by stroke. This is just for TBI. It's usually more men that are at risk than women. And that usually is just like the professions that men work in, the greater likelihood of taking risks and stuff like that. That's why men are more at risk. What about other causes of neurogenic speech disorders? Well, we've also got stroke, tumor, parasites, brainworms from undercooked pork. Gross, but it is the thing. He's back, and he's biting my toes again. So these are all common causes of neurogenic speech disorders. Do concussion injuries mimic typical neurodegenerative diseases? Yes or no? No, they do not. They're their own thing. You have this coup-counter-coup injury with concussion injuries where you see damage. So let's say you got hit here. The brain would first hit where whatever this is, a fist or whatever, would hit here, but then the head would go this way and the brain would start moving afterwards, and then you'd end up with damage over here. If it's forward, you have damage to the brain right here, but then you're also going to have damage when the brain moves back. This is called coup-counter-coup, coup-counter-coup. This is the type of damage you see a lot of times with concussion injuries. Also, remember that picture that I showed you of the typical progression of neurodegenerative disease and concussion-related injury. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy is the name for chronic concussion injuries. They start in different places. The chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, starts in the frontal poles of the frontal lobe and also the temporal poles of the temporal lobe. And you don't see that with typical neurodegenerative disorders. Usually you see it in places like the basal ganglia. All right, let's talk about stroke. What's the difference between an ischemic and hemorrhagic stroke? Well, ischemic is a blockage, and hemorrhagic stroke is a rupture. Which one is worse? Hemorrhagic is worse. Because in addition to a loss of blood flow beyond where the hemorrhage is, which you would have with an ischemic stroke, right? So a blockage or a hemorrhage, then you're not going to have blood serving what's beyond either the blockage or the hemorrhage. But in addition to that, you also have swelling where the hemorrhage is, which is going to put pressure on all the brain regions right around the hemorrhage. Does aphasia only impact expressive speech, meaning speech of just speaking? No, it impacts expressive speech, which would be like a Broca's type thing. It impacts receptive speech, understanding. It impacts mimicry, especially if you damage the arcuate fasciculus. That's the one that you're looking at for mimicry, and other areas as well. Also, one other thing that I want to highlight here is aphasias don't just impact speech. They also impact writing. They also impact sign language, other languages. Like if you speak multiple languages, it's very unusual, if not completely unheard of, that you would have one language that survives and the other doesn't. Because the problem is getting the concept to the word. So it doesn't matter if the word is different, the word is written, the word is signed, the word is spoken in multiple languages. If you can't get the word, you can't get the concept to the word, that's the problem. Broca's aphasia is difficulty getting the word out, but again, they know the word. The word is there. They can feel that the concept is there. They know what they want to say, but they can't tag those concepts with words. That's Broca's aphasia. Wernicke's aphasia is difficulty understanding. You speak word salad. It seems like you have little to no comprehension. This is the green shirt guy. It didn't really seem like he knew what he was being asked. Interestingly, he did understand that he was being asked a question. So there's some sort of comprehension there, but he didn't seem to understand what he was asked, And then when he tried to answer, word salad. And then again, mimicry. Remember that other person, it was also a guy, feel like he had kind of a short beard, and maybe longer hair-ish. This looked like me, but older maybe. So he was having a problem with mimicry. Excellent speech, didn't seem to have Broca's aphasia. Excellent comprehension, didn't seem to have Wernicke's aphasia. Could not mimic those 3 words that the lady was trying to get him to mimic. Remember that? So that's damage to the arcuate fasciculus, which runs between Wernicke's area and Broca's area. What is the goal of our aphasia treatments? Well, it's just to enhance quality of life, however possible. I mean, if we can totally rehabilitate someone, you've enhanced quality of life. That's not usually what's going to happen. It's not a realistic goal. Even if you can just get 1 word, rehabilitate 1 word, that's a realistic goal, and that can enhance quality of life, right? So, like, let's say that I had Broca's aphasia and I couldn't say Gooby, but he doesn't know it yet. It's not going to be his name. I know it's stupid. Like, I've heard it. But I would want to be able to say that word. He's got a sister who's about 11. And actually, we got him because I had 2 and I don't have 2 anymore. So she needed a buddy. She hates him, though. Like, she doesn't get along with him. He loves her, but anyway. So, like, if I wanted to be able to call him, Charlie is her name. It would be really great to be able to say Charlie if I had Broca's aphasia. It'd be really meaningful. And that's your goal with aphasia treatments, is helping them however possible. Family names, pet names, favorite foods, favorite activities, something like that, right? That's what you're going for, and that's a realistic goal. Common language deficits after a TBI, finding words, organizing words and sentences, and also pragmatic problems like metaphors. So these are some things that we only barely touched on, barely. Beyond aphasia, you can also have strange problems with metaphors, like thinking outside the box, basically, or organization. Next, speech science. What is the source filter model? This is really important. This is going to come up forever. Breathing is the power source. Or this is my source filter model. Breathing is the power source. You have to have air to be able to make sound. The vocal folds are the sound source. You have to be able to adduct, right? ADD, adduct your vocal folds to be able to get them to vibrate together and make a sound. And then the filter is the pharynx and the mouth, the nasal cavity, the oral cavity, which is the mouth. Those are the resonators and articulators that mold the sound to make what you want to say. So that's the source filter model. How does speech work? Well, the vocal folds create puffs of air, right? We know that they kind of boop, 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 do this kind of thing. And those become a sound pressure wave. There are harmonics, which let's jump down a bullet point or 2 here. And the harmonic series is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. It's just counting. You'll have harmonics of whatever the fundamental frequency is. So the fundamental frequency is how fast these vocal folds are moving. How many cycles per second is the frequency. And you'll have harmonics on top of that. So if it's 100 hertz, you'll have 200, 300, 400, 500 hertz, and so on, as harmonics. Those are molded by the filter, the pharynx, the oral cavity, the nasal cavity. What is he doing over there? Anyway. Hi, what'd you find? Okay, come back up here. You're like a snake. Come here. Whoa. All right, just go to sleep here. It's nighttime. So, nope, it's not going to happen. All right, so those are going to be molded, and some of those harmonics are going to be accentuated, and some of them are going to be dampened, and that's what creates the actual sound that you hear, like ah, ooh, e. Sound pressure waves are sound, basically, right? You end up with a compression when the air forces the vocal folds open, and a rarefaction, which just means um, less air. There's less air molecules taking up a spot. They're rarer um, when the vocal folds are closed. Okay, so we've covered all the rest of this. Let's go on. And we've covered most of this as well. The formants, we didn't talk about the formants, but the formants are the ones that are accentuated. So based on how, let's say, your pharynx and your mouth are set up, you'll have some harmonics that are given more power, like the bridge that we watched, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. There's more power at that frequency. Those become formants. There we go. So you can see that there's those more yellowy orange stripes on there. Those are formants. There's more acoustic energy there. This is what we measure when we're actually measuring speech. So when you take 375 speech science, you're going to be looking at these formants. And that's what it corresponds to. That's why they're important. Okay, let's talk about fluency disorders. Typical speech, of course, is always a little disfluent, right? We always say things like, It's another one. I guess just a block like that. So no, you should know this, breaks filler words and repetitions. You might see something about that. Stuttering is an unusually high frequency of disfluencies. That's the primary characteristic, are all those, an unusually high frequency of disfluencies. But you also have to have the secondary characteristics to really call that stuttering. So if you just have only the primary characteristics, it's strange. That doesn't usually, it's not like someone would just kind of like stutter. You thought that was weird. It's not so like someone would stutter without the secondary characteristics very, very often. I've never seen an instance of that. The secondary characteristics are really diagnostic of, okay, time to get down again. I know I'm being boring right now. The secondary characteristics are really diagnostic of stuttering and, stuttering. Also remember cluttering. Cluttering is sort of the opposite of stuttering. It's trying to produce too many sounds at one time. All right, so most cases of stuttering, this is also true of cluttering, are developmental and they present before 7. We don't usually look before 5 because, again, you see things like stuttering in just typical language development. But then after 5, like 5 years, 5 years, 6 months, something like that, to 7, and beyond 7, then we're definitely looking and trying to diagnose stuttering. But usually it presents before 7. So there's kind of a narrow window where most cases of stuttering actually show up. The secondary characteristics that you're going to see, that you're most likely to see, are things like blinking, pounding the fist, shaking the head, also very tight vocal cords when inhaling. That's that kid Matthew does that kind of thing when he's talking. And then also muscular tension before speaking. So like, my light just came on. Muscular tension before speaking, like, dude, like something like that, right? It's not an anxiety-based disorder, right? But anxiety does make it worse. So it's not something that you're developing like an anxiety disorder. It's not like obsessive compulsive disorder, or what's another anxiety disorder? You can think of one that's really common in Japan, but Anyway, there's a blushing disorder that's really common in Japan that's an anxiety disorder. Anyway, stuttering is not an anxiety disorder. But when you're in anxiety-producing situations, your stuttering can get worse. Now, this is also true with other basal ganglia disorders, though, like just typical motor disorders that are caused by damage to or just disorder of the basal ganglia. Those motor disorders will get worse under high pressure situations. It doesn't mean they're an anxiety disorder either. It just means that they get worse because of it. The primary characteristics can range from mild to severe. This is as many as 20% of the words, or 1 in 5. That's for like a really severe case. It looks like there's a genetic link, right? 50% of stutterers have a family member who also stutters. And identical twins are much more likely to both be stutterers than fraternal twins or just siblings. We also see that Broca's area is subactive in people who stutter relative to people who don't. We know that stutterers have slower reaction times. And those are things we know. When you're diagnosing stuttering, one thing you want to do is collect a lot of speech samples. And again, you want to look for tests that have norms, if possible, standardized tests. But if you don't, you want to look at the percentage of disfluencies to words. You're going to do that either way, whether you have standardized test or not. It's just, you'll get a criteria for the percentage of disfluencies to words with a standardized test. And then cluttering is jumbling speech sounds together. And again, it's also more likely when they're under a high load situation. They're more likely to clutter when they're anxious. But it's not an anxiety disorder. All right. Now, motor disorders. I think we're on our last one here. We are. How are motor disorders different from aphasias? Well, aphasias affect the word retrieval or word processing. So we have this concept and we're trying to attach a word to it, like in a concept in the brain. We're trying to attach the brain version of the word to it, not just the output version of the word, but the brain version of the word. And we can't. Motor disorders, however, you can find the words, you can attach the brain version of the word to the cognitive idea that goes along with that word, but you have trouble with the output. So they can both be neural, they can both be cognitive, they can be in the brain. Of course, they're not limited to that. Motor disorders don't have to just be neural, but they kind of affect different levels of the process of retrieving a concept, then putting a word to it, then taking that word and telling the body how to say it. And then the body actually does it. So aphasias affect the cognitive idea to the word, and apraxia, so we're going to move to the next one now, apraxia affects the word going to the body. So there's something wrong with the program, the motor program of how to say that word or group of words or something that's going to the body. So you've got neural or spinal components. The programming is disordered. Now with dysarthria, it's actually like muscular weakness. It's the machinery that's damaged, basically. So the word can be accessed fine. There's no aphasia. The word can then be sent to the motor system just fine. There's no apraxia. But with dysarthria, there's a problem with muscular weakness, muscular paralysis, something like that. The programming's intact, but the execution is disordered. And that's all that we have on our exam. So questions related to those things. You should be really well set up after you watch this. So the exam is going to open on Sunday around 10. And you'll have all day Sunday to do it. You'll have all day Monday to do it. There is no class on Monday because if you don't have time on either Sunday or Monday to do the exam, use the class time to do the exam. But of course, you don't have to do it at that time. You can do it at any time. So I'll see you again on Wednesday, and we're going to finish up motor disorders on Wednesday. And maybe I'll have come up with a name for Gooby by then. He just seems like a Gooby, but it's not a word, you know? I don't know what it is. It's a sound. It's just a group of sounds. Anyway, good luck. Study this, study your quizzes, and look at the PowerPoints, and you'll be fine. All right. See you on Wednesday. Oh, I got to stop this thing. Okay, so you get to watch me like fumble around and try to find the stop button. Found it.